A young bride, betrayed on her wedding day by a wealthy man, finds herself alone and unexpectedly raising quadruplets. Years later, he reappears, igniting a storm of emotions and a fierce custody battle. Join us on this heartfelt tale of love, heartbreak, and resilience. Olivia Smith stood before the full-length mirror, her wedding dress glistening in the warm, golden light of the suite. She adjusted the delicate lace veil again, her fingers trembling slightly as if the act could steady her nerves. The silence in the room was broken only by the steady ticking of the wall clock, amplifying her anxious heartbeat. This was supposed to be her day, the day she would become Mrs. Byron Richard, the wife of one of Boston's most prominent and wealthy men. Then, the phone rang. Olivia turned toward it, her face still lit with an expectant smile. She picked up the receiver with a soft, hopeful hello. Her voice quivered slightly, an undercurrent of nerves she couldn't quite hide. There was a long pause, heavy and foreboding. Olivia Byron's voice came through, cold and detached. "I'm not coming." The words struck her like a physical blow, stealing the air from her lungs. Her chest tightened painfully as disbelief washed over her. What she whispered, her voice barely audible. "It's over. I can't do this. The company needs my full attention right now. You'll understand. Someday." And with that, the line went dead. The phone slipped from Olivia's grasp, crashing onto the floor as she stared at her reflection in the mirror, a bride left without a groom. A love story cruelly cut short. She stood frozen as the seconds ticked by, the realization dawning that this wasn't just the end of her relationship. It was the beginning of a battle she could never have anticipated. That day shattered Olivia's world. The opulent suite, once a symbol of Bayon's wealth and their promising future together, now felt hollow and unbearably cold. Surrounded by the remnants of her dashed dreams, she ripped the veil from her hair and threw it aside. The intricate lace crumpled on the floor, a cruel reminder of all the promises Bayon had broken. In the days that followed, news of the cancelled wedding spread like wildfire. Every headline seemed to scream about Bayon Richard's last-minute decision, portraying Olivia as the forsaken bride left to piece her life back together. Paparazzi hounded her relentlessly, their cameras capturing every painful moment as she vacated the penthouse they had once shared. But Olivia refused to let the weight of her humiliation crush her. With no job, no connections, and nowhere to turn, she gathered what little she had and disappeared from the high society circles she had once inhabited. She found a modest, run-down apartment on the outskirts of the city, a stark contrast to the luxury she had grown accustomed to. Yet, it was hers, a place untouched by Bayon's influence, free from his shadow. A month later, one quiet morning, Olivia sat alone in her tiny bathroom, her hands trembling as she stared down at a pregnancy test. A second line began to appear, faint but unmistakable. Her heart sank, then surged with a whirlwind of emotions: fear, uncertainty, and an unexpected glimmer of hope. She knew she couldn't call Bayon. She wouldn't. Not after the way he had abandoned her so effortlessly, walking away without so much as a backward glance. She had no intention of letting him back into her life. But as the weeks turned into months, Olivia's body grew round with life for lives, as she soon discovered. "How am I going to do this?" she whispered one night, her hands cradling her swollen belly as she sat alone in the dim light of her apartment. Yet, as overwhelming as her circumstances felt, she resolved to persevere. Olivia not only survived but found strength she didn't know she possessed. She worked tirelessly, juggling 2 jobs to build a stable life for herself and her children. John, Peter, Jake, and Jesse, her quadruplets, became the center of her world, 4 tiny miracles who filled her days with laughter and love. As the years passed, Olivia's determination grew alongside her boys. Each milestone, their first words, their giggles, their unsteady steps became a testament to her strength and a reminder that she had made the right decision to leave Bayon out of their lives. He had forfeited his role in their family, and Olivia believed he didn't deserve a second chance. The boys had Bayon Richard's piercing blue eyes and his sandy blonde hair. Strangers often stopped Olivia Smith on the street, marveling at how strikingly alike her sons looked. Their resemblance to Bayon was undeniable, and each time it was mentioned, a dull ache stirred in Olivia's heart. It was as though Bayon's presence lingered in every smile, every mischievous glance her boys shared. By the time John, Peter, Jake, and Jesse turned 3, Olivia had carved out a rhythm to their lives. She worked at a modest marketing firm during the day and spent her evenings freelancing as a graphic designer. After her boys were tucked into bed, she burned the midnight oil to make ends meet. Money was scarce, but she made it stretch. She had no other choice. One warm afternoon, Olivia took her sons to the park. Their laughter filled the air as they played on the swings. She watched them with a soft smile, cherishing the simple joy of their giggles. But then, an unsettling sensation crept up the back of her neck. Turning around, she froze. Standing just a few feet away, watching her boys intently, was Bayan Richard. The world seemed to pause. Bayan looked different, his features sharper, his presence even more imposing than she remembered. Dressed immaculately in a tailored suit, his neatly combed hair added to his polished demeanor. Yet his eyes gave him away. There was vulnerability there, raw and unspoken. "Olivia," he murmured, taking a cautious step forward. "No," she whispered, her voice trembling. She instinctively moved to stand between her sons and Bayan, her body a protective barrier. Bayan's gaze shifted, his face draining of color as his eyes landed on the boys. "Are they?" he began but couldn't finish the sentence. Olivia watched the realization dawn on him, his expression crumbling. For a moment he looked utterly lost. "They're not yours," Olivia lied, the words spilling from her lips before she could think. But she saw the disbelief in Bayan's eyes, the way they darted between her and the boys, scrutinizing every familiar detail. He stepped closer, his hands clenched at his sides. "Olivia, I need to know," he pleaded, his voice barely above a whisper. "Are they mine?" Lifting her chin, Olivia met his gaze, her face a mask of determination. "It doesn't matter, Bayan. You made your decision years ago. We don't need you." Without waiting for a response, she turned to her boys, her voice bright but shaky. "Come on, boys. It's time to go home." The boys ran to her, their tiny hands clasping hers as they left. Bayan stood rooted to the spot, his eyes fixed on them. When Olivia glanced back briefly, she caught something in his expression: determination. He wasn't going to walk away this time. 2 weeks later, Bayan reappeared. This time, he wasn't alone. He came with a lawyer. Olivia's stomach sank as she skimmed the papers thrust into her hands. "Custody," she whispered, her voice tight with disbelief. "Yes," he replied quietly. "Olivia, I made a mistake. I see that now. But those boys, they deserve to know their father. And I deserve a chance to be in their lives." Her hands trembled as she crumpled the papers. "You don't get to walk back into my life after what you did," she snapped. "After abandoning us." "I didn't know," he shot back, his voice cracking. "I had no idea, Olivia. You never told me." The dam broke, her anger spilling out. "You left, Bayan. You left me with nothing, no money, no home, and 4 babies to raise on my own." Bayan flinched, guilt flickering across his face. But he steadied himself. "I'm not leaving again," he said firmly. The following months blurred into a relentless cycle of court hearings and legal battles. Bayan showed up to every meeting, unwavering in his determination to be part of the boys' lives. Olivia, though skeptical, began to see that his intentions might be genuine. But trust was a fragile thing, not easily rebuilt. As Olivia's walls started to crack, Bayan's fiancée Lila made her entrance. One evening, as Olivia prepared herself to let her guard down, a tall, striking woman emerged from Bayan's car. Lila's manicured hand rested possessively on his arm. Olivia's stomach churned as Lila's perfectly composed smile settled on her. She was the embodiment of poise and privilege, her designer coat and impeccable hair exuding confidence. "Hello, Olivia," Lila said, her voice silky smooth. "I believe we have a few things to discuss." Olivia felt her heart pound, the ground beneath her feet shifting. "What are you doing here?" she asked, keeping her tone steady as she glanced at her sons, who were playing a few feet away. Lila tilted her head, feigning amusement. "Isn't it obvious?" She turned to Bayan, her expression softening as she looped her arm through his. "We're going to be a family, Olivia." Olivia's stomach twisted painfully. "What are you talking about?" "We're getting married," Lila said casually, as though the words weren't tearing Olivia apart. "And Bayan and I want to ensure that these precious boys are part of our lives." The weight of her words, our lives, our family, hung heavily in the air. Olivia clenched her fists, determined not to let Lila see her break. "They're not yours," Olivia Smith shot back, her voice quivering with restrained fury. "You have no right." "Actually, we do," Lila interjected smoothly, her tone dripping with icy confidence. "Bayan is their father, and as his wife, I'll be. Well, let's just say their stepmother." Olivia felt the ground shift beneath her feet. How had it come to this? She had thought Bayan's sudden return would be the hardest challenge she'd face, but now Lila was here, twisting the dagger deeper into wounds that hadn't healed. "You're not their mother," Olivia spat, her composure hanging by a thread. "And you never will be." Lila's smirk only widened. "No, you're right. I won't be. But I will be part of their lives, whether you like it or not." Bayan, who had stood silent until this point, stepped forward, his gaze fixed on Olivia. "We need to make this work, Olivia. For the boys." His audacity sent a surge of white-hot anger through her. For years she had worked tirelessly, sacrificing everything to ensure her children had a stable life. And now Bayan was here with his fiancée, acting as though he could simply insert himself back into their lives and assume control. "You don't get to come back and pretend to play father to my sons," Olivia hissed, her eyes blazing. "Our sons," Bayan corrected softly. "And I'm not going anywhere." Olivia's stare bore into him, a mix of anger and something she hated to admit, grief. That same look he had once given her, the one that promised forever, was now clouded with guilt and regret. She had fallen for those promises before. She wouldn't do it again. "Please, Olivia," he murmured. "Let's talk about this. I want to be there for them." Taking a deep breath to steady herself, Olivia said firmly, "You can be in their lives, but only on my terms, not hers." Lila's confident facade turned, her eyes flashing with irritation. "That's not your decision to make." Olivia's gaze remained locked on Bayan. "Yes, it is, because I'm the one who has been there. I've raised them, comforted them when they cried, and held them when they were scared. I am their mother." Lila opened her mouth to argue, but Bayan raised a hand, silencing her. His expression conflicted, he turned back to Olivia. "I just need a chance," he said softly. "Please." The war inside Olivia between her anger and the part of her that wanted to believe he had changed was almost unbearable. She didn't trust him, not yet. But her boys deserved to know their father. And despite everything, a small part of her hoped. "I'll think about it," she said, her voice firm. "But don't think for a second you can make demands not after what you did." Relief flickered across Bayan's face. "Thank you." Lila, however, looked livid. "You can't be serious, Bayan. She's trying to dictate everything." "That's enough." "Lila," he snapped, his voice cutting through her protests. "This is between Olivia and me." Olivia watched Lila's face contort with fury before she spun on her heel and stormed toward the car. Bayan lingered for a moment, his gaze steady on Olivia. "I meant it," he said quietly. "I want to make this right." Then he turned and followed Lila, leaving Olivia alone once again. That night, Olivia couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, Lila's smug, victorious expression haunted her. This wasn't just about the boys, it was about power. Lila wanted to assert her dominance, to remind Olivia where she thought Bayan's loyalty truly lay. But Olivia wasn't about to back down. The next morning, she called her lawyer. Their conversation was long and filled with tension as they combed through every possible scenario. By the time she hung up, Olivia was drained but resolute. She would fight for her boys whatever it took. 2 weeks later, Olivia found herself at the courthouse, her nerves taut. Bayan was already there, looking tense but resolute. And beside him, an imposing presence as always, stood Lila. The hearing was grueling. Lila's lawyer spared no detail, painting Olivia as an unfit mother. He cited her modest income, her small apartment, and her lack of family support as evidence that she couldn't provide the life her sons deserved. "It's clear that Miss Smith cannot give these children the stability they need," the lawyer intoned, his voice laced with disdain. "Mr. Richard, on the other hand, offers financial security, a stable home, and a loving environment." Olivia gritted her teeth, her hands clenched beneath the table. How dare they? How dare they twist her sacrifices into failures, as though Bayan's absence had been her choice. Then her lawyer stood, his tone measured but resolute. Miss Smith has raised her children alone for 3 years. She has been their sole source of love, guidance, and support. Despite her limited resources, her boys are thriving, healthy, happy, and deeply loved. Not once has she sought financial assistance from Mr. Richard, even though she would have been justified in doing so. Bayan shifted in his seat, his gaze falling to the table. Olivia's chest tightened as she saw the guilt written across his face. A small part of her wanted him to feel the weight of his decisions to hurt the way she had. But another part of her wanted him to understand what he had lost. The judge, a no-nonsense woman with a piercing gaze, leaned forward. "Miss Smith," she said, her tone steady, "I believe you are a devoted mother. However, I also believe children benefit from knowing both parents, provided it's in their best interest. Are you willing to consider a shared custody arrangement?" Olivia hesitated, her eyes flicking to Bayan. He didn't look like the cold, detached man who had abandoned her. He looked almost familiar. After a long moment, she nodded. "Yes, Your Honor." Bayan exhaled audibly, relief washing over him. For a fleeting moment, Olivia let herself hope. Perhaps this arrangement could work. Perhaps they could find a way to co-parent. But as she left the courtroom, Lila stepped in her path, her expression venomous. "You're making a mistake," she hissed. "I will ruin you, Olivia. Mark my words." Olivia squared her shoulders, her voice calm but firm. "You can try," she said. "But I will never let you take my boys." As Olivia Smith walked away, one thought consumed her: the real fight was only beginning. The weeks that followed were a blur of tension, confusion, and mounting anxiety. Her boys, far too young to grasp the complexities of the custody battle unfolding around them, simply knew they now had a father, a stranger who bore an uncanny resemblance to them. Bayan Richard was trying, Olivia couldn't deny that. He picked up the boys each weekend, taking them to the zoo, sports games, or amusement parks. He put effort into learning their favorite things: John's fascination with puzzles and numbers, Peter's budding passion for drawing, and Jesse's obsession with soccer. But no matter how hard Bayan tried, there was always an awkwardness in his interactions, a stiffness that the boys couldn't help but notice. And every time Olivia saw him falter in his attempts to connect, it reignited the sting of his past betrayal. "I'm their father," Bayan said quietly one evening as he dropped the boys off, his tone both steady and determined. "They deserve to know me." "I know," Olivia replied, her arms crossed protectively across her chest. "But they're confused, Bayan. You can't just walk into their lives and expect them to accept you overnight." His jaw tightened. "What do you expect me to do, Olivia? I'm doing the best I can." She exhaled, glancing at her boys who were seated on the living room floor, completely engrossed in building a block tower. "Be patient," she murmured. "And for heaven's sake, keep Lila out of the picture. She's making this harder for everyone." Bayan's face darkened. "Lila is my fiancée. She's going to be part of their lives, whether you like it or not." The words landed like a blow. Olivia struggled to maintain her composure. "You're going to have to choose, Bayan," she said softly, "between keeping your fiancé happy and doing what's best for our sons." His gaze held hers, a flicker of regret evident in his eyes. But then he shook his head. "I'm not choosing," he said firmly. "I'll make it work." Olivia knew better. Lila was a storm waiting to unleash, and sooner or later her fury would wreak havoc. The storm came on a rainy Friday evening. Olivia was rushing to get the boys ready for Bayan's scheduled visit, their tiny rain boots scattered across the entryway. Just as she was zipping Jesse's jacket, a knock echoed through the house. Opening the door, Olivia's heart sank. Lila stood on the porch, dressed in a pristine white trench coat, an umbrella perched elegantly in her hand. "Where's Bayan?" Olivia asked, her voice wary. "He's not coming," Lila replied smoothly, stepping inside without waiting for permission. "He asked me to pick up the boys today." Olivia's body stiffened as she glanced at her sons, who had gone silent at the sight of Lila. John moved closer to Peter, clutching his arm, while Jesse peeked out from behind Olivia, his wide eyes filled with uncertainty. "No," Olivia said firmly. "You're not taking them." Lila's eyes narrowed, her confident demeanor hardening. "I'm not asking for your permission, Olivia." Squaring her shoulders, Olivia blocked Lila's path. Get out of my house. A cold sneer crept across Lila's face. You think you can keep me out of their lives forever, she spat. I'm going to be their stepmother. They will be part of my family. No, they won't, Olivia shot back, her voice resolute. Because they're my family. And I won't let you manipulate buy-in into. Oh, please, Lila cut in, her tone venomous. You think parading those kids in front of him will make him forget about me? About us? Buy-in and I are getting married, and when we do, I'll make sure you never see a cent of his money again. The accusation hit like a slap. Olivia stared at her, stunned into silence. She had never asked for money, not during her pregnancy, not after the boys were born. The insinuation made her blood boil. This isn't about money, Olivia said, her voice trembling but unwavering. This is about what's best for my boys, and what's best is for you to stay far away from them. Lila's lips curled into a chilling smile. You just don't get it, do you? You're going to lose. Buy-in will realize that I'm the one who cares about his future, and when he does, he'll take those boys from you. Over my dead body, Olivia whispered. The smile widened. That can be arranged. Before Olivia could respond, Jesse's small, shaky voice broke the tension. Go away, he shouted, stepping forward, his little face crumpling with emotion. You're mean. I don't like you. Lila's smug expression vanished. Her eyes narrowed dangerously as she opened her mouth, but Olivia moved quickly, stepping protectively between Lila and her boys. Leave, Olivia said, her voice low but firm. Now. The two women stared each other down, the room thick with unspoken threats. Then, with a dramatic toss of her hair, Lila spun on her heel and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Olivia sank to the floor, pulling her sons close. Their small bodies trembled as she held them, her hands gently stroking their hair. It's okay, baby, she whispered, her voice soft yet filled with determination. Mommy's here. Mommy's got you. But as she sat there, cradling her children, one terrifying thought gripped her. Lila wasn't finished, and Olivia wasn't sure how far she'd have to go to protect her boys from whatever came next. Buy-in Richard sensed something was off the moment he stepped into his penthouse that night. The room was dim, the air heavy with unspoken tension. Lila sat on the couch, her polished demeanor marred by the sharpness in her eyes. A half-empty glass of wine dangled from her hand. What's wrong, he asked, shrugging off his coat, his voice cautious. Where were you, she snapped, her words tight and clipped. I told you I had a meeting, he replied, though a flicker of doubt crossed his face. Didn't I? Her laugh was humorless, bitter. No, Buy-in, you didn't. And while you were off at your so-called meeting, I had to go pick up your kids. Like some glorified chauffeur. Buy-in's brows furrowed. You went to Olivia's house. Yes, I went to Olivia's, Lila shot back, her tone rising. Because you didn't show up. I stood there, listening to her tell me I don't belong in their lives. And as if that wasn't enough, one of those brats had the audacity to yell at me, as though I'm some kind of villain. Buy-in held up his hands, his voice calm but firm. Lila, they're just children. They don't understand what's going on. Her face darkened, her voice growing louder. They don't understand because you won't let me be part of their lives. You're letting her win, Buy-in. You're letting Olivia push me out. He blinked, taken aback. Win? This isn't some competition, Lila. These are my sons. Her glare burned into him. And what am I, she hissed, stepping closer. Just a placeholder? Someone to keep you company until you decide to play the devoted father again. Buy-in's patience was thinning. Stop it, Lila. This isn't about you, it's about them. Her voice dropped, becoming dangerous, almost a whisper. No, Buy-in. This is about us. And if you don't make a choice soon, you're going to lose me for good. He stood frozen, his mind racing. He cared deeply for Lila, he wouldn't have proposed otherwise. But his boys, they were his own flesh and blood. Innocent children caught in the middle of a storm they didn't create. How could he abandon them? I can't walk away from them, he said softly, his tone heavy with finality. Not again. Lila's face twisted in fury. With a sharp motion, she hurled her glass against the wall, the crash echoing in the tense silence. "Fine," she spat, her voice icy. "But don't come crying to me when she takes everything from you." She stormed out, slamming the door behind her, leaving Bayan alone in the oppressive quiet. The custody battle stretched on for months, wearing Olivia Smith down bit by bit. Each time she entered the courtroom, she braced herself for another round of brutal accusations, another attempt to paint her as unfit to raise her children. But Olivia refused to break. Her resilience shone through the relentless attacks from Lila's legal team. Bayan, caught in the crossfire between his crumbling relationship with Lila and his desire to be part of his children's lives, tried to play mediator. He repeatedly assured Olivia that he wanted what was best for John, Peter, and Jesse. Yet his actions, missing visitations, arriving late, and failing to show up for milestones told a different story. Then, one day, the situation escalated. Olivia received a call from her lawyer that sent a chill through her. "Lila has filed for full custody," the lawyer informed her grimly. "Not Bayan, Lila. She's claiming you're emotionally unstable and that the boys would be better off with her and Bayan." Olivia's breath caught. "She can't do that," she whispered, gripping the phone tightly. "She's not even their mother." "No," the lawyer agreed. "But she's banking on her influence and financial resources to sway the court. We need to be prepared for the worst." At the next hearing, Olivia sat in stunned silence as Lila's lawyer presented their case. Every detail of her life was twisted into ammunition. Her modest apartment, her lack of financial wealth, her refusal to allow Lila near her sons, all were used to paint her as a vindictive, unstable woman poisoning her children against their father. Through it all, Olivia's gaze flicked to Bayan. He sat silent, staring at the table. She could tell he didn't agree with Lila's portrayal of her. But he said nothing. He didn't defend her, didn't refute the claims. And in that moment, Olivia realized the truth: Bayan wasn't strong enough to stand up for her. He was too afraid of losing Lila to do what was right. But Olivia was not weak. She would fight to keep her boys, no matter the cost. When it was her turn to speak, Olivia rose, her voice steady and clear. She spoke of her children, their laughter, their dreams, the love they shared. She described the life she had built for them, the sacrifices she had made, the strength it took to raise them alone. "I'm not perfect," she said, her voice cracking slightly as she met Bayan's gaze. "But I love my sons more than anything in this world. And I will fight for them with every ounce of strength I have." The room fell silent. The judge, a stern woman with an air of authority, turned to Bayan. "Mr. Richards," she said sharply, "do you support your fiancé's petition for full custody?" Bayan's head shot up, his expression one of shock. What he stammered. The judge's voice was firm. "Do you believe your fiancé should have more say over your children than their mother?" Bayan looked between Lila, who glared at him with thinly veiled rage, and Olivia, who stood unwavering. Slowly, he shook his head. "No," he said quietly. "I don't." Lila's fury was palpable. "Bayan, you can't." "I'm sorry." "Lila," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "But this isn't right." The judge nodded, turning back to Olivia. "Miss Smith, your children are fortunate to have such a dedicated and loving mother. The court rules in your favor." The nightmare was over. Lila stormed out of the courtroom, her plans shattered. Within weeks, her relationship with Bayan fell apart, the bitterness too much to overcome. Olivia had won, but more than that, she had proven her strength, her resolve, and the unbreakable bond she shared with her sons. Without Lila's influence, Bayan Richard stepped back, agreeing to a more limited custody arrangement. Initially, his weekend visits were supervised, allowing the boys time to adjust before they spent more extended periods with him. Olivia Smith handled it one day at a time, cautiously rebuilding a sense of trust not in him as a partner, but as the father of her sons. Bayan began to try harder, putting more effort into his role as a father. Over time, John, Peter, and Jesse started looking forward to their weekends with him. Yet, the emotional scars remained, deeply etched into their shared history. Healing, Olivia knew, would take time, perhaps years. And while she understood that Bayan might never truly become a part of their family in the way she and the boys were, she was at peace with that. She had fought for her children and for herself, and she had emerged stronger. One quiet evening, as Olivia tucked the boys into bed, John looked up at her with a seriousness that made her pause. His wide, curious eyes met hers. "Mommy," he whispered, his voice soft yet probing. "Is Daddy ever going to come back to live with us?" Olivia's heart clenched, her love for her son swelling alongside a pang of sadness. Kneeling beside his bed, she gently brushed a strand of hair from his forehead. "He will always be your daddy, sweetheart," she said softly, her voice warm with reassurance. "But no, he won't come back to live with us." John blinked, processing her words, then nodded slowly. A small crease formed on his forehead as he considered her answer. "That's okay," he said finally, his voice calm but resolute. "'Cause we have you." A smile broke across Olivia's face, her heart full of gratitude and love. "Yes, you do," she murmured, her voice tender. "And you always will." As she switched off the light and quietly left the room, a profound sense of peace settled over her. The struggles of the past, the pain, the betrayal felt like distant memories. She and her boys were finally free to move forward. The years passed gently. Olivia's boys grew into happy, thriving young men, shaped by the warmth and stability of the home she had built for them. Bayan remained a part of their lives, but his role was distant, more akin to a guest than an active father. He eventually remarried, though it was clear to Olivia that she and the boys lingered in his thoughts. Olivia, meanwhile, forged her own path. She threw herself into her career, transforming her small marketing business into a respected firm renowned for its creativity and ethical practices. She dated occasionally, though none of those relationships ever filled the void Bayan had left behind. That emptiness, she realized, wasn't something that needed filling. She had all she truly needed. One bright afternoon, Olivia stood on the sidelines of a bustling soccer field, her heart swelling with pride. Jesse sprinted across the green expanse, his face alight with joy. Beside her, John and Peter cheered him on, their laughter and shouts blending with the energy of the crowd. For the first time in years, Olivia felt a profound sense of contentment. She had fought battles that had broken her, but she had rebuilt herself and her family from the ground up. What she had found in the process was something far greater than what she had lost: peace, strength, and an unshakable hope for the future. As the boys ran toward her, their faces flushed with excitement and happiness, Olivia opened her arms wide. Their laughter and smiles were a reminder of everything she had worked for. This love, this unbreakable bond was her victory. This family was all she had ever needed. Olivia's story is one of resilience, strength, and the enduring love of a mother. Her determination to protect her children from heartbreak and betrayal carried her through the most grueling trials, culminating in a triumph that reshaped her life. Despite Bayan's abandonment and Lila's relentless schemes to fracture her family, Olivia proved that true strength comes from within. No wealth or influence could ever overshadow the power of a mother's unwavering love. Thank you for experiencing Olivia's journey. We hope it has touched your heart as much as it has ours. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and turn on notifications to stay connected with more heartfelt stories. Sending you warm wishes and a big smile. See you in the next tale.